Welcome to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and today we're going to get into some use of the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. All right, so here we have an example of a quadratic equation. All right, now one thing to think about is like, how do I know that it's a quadratic? I know that it's quadratic because the biggest exponent I see is a 2. All right, I got x to the second power, I got x to the first power. The biggest exponent is a 2, so that's how I know it's a quadratic. Now, there are different ways to solve quadratic equations. Sometimes you can solve them by factoring. Sometimes you can solve them by completing the square. Sometimes you can solve them by the square root property, or some people call it the square root law. But today, we're going to get into using the quadratic formula. All right, first thing you got to do when you want to solve an equation by the quadratic formula. Well, you don't really have to do this, but I like to do this. I like to put it in what's called standard form, right? I like to put it in standard form, right? So if it's in standard form, that means that all the terms are on the left side of the equal sign, right? So this negative 21, you got to slide him over, right? You got to put that negative 21 over there. So we're going to rewrite this, and we're going to say x squared plus 10x. Now, when I slide him over, he can't be negative no more, right? It's not going to be negative no more. It's going to become positive. The sign changes. When you switch the side, you change the sign. So it's kind of like just doing adding 21 on the right, adding 21 on the left. I would have positive 21. And now what am I left with on the right? A 0. That's standard form. I got my x squared term, my x term, and my constant. Everything on the left side of the equal sign. That's standard form. Now, because I'm using the quadratic formula, I need to identify A, B, and C, right? The numbers that represent the values A, B, and C, because I'm going to use them in the quadratic formula, right? Now, A is the coefficient of x squared. That's something you just have to memorize. A is the coefficient of x squared. Now, if I look at x squared, I don't see a number written in front of x squared. That tells me that there's an invisible 1 there, right? That means I have 1x squared. So A equals 1, all right? B is the coefficient of the x term, or the x to the first term, which is 10. So I got B equals 10. C is my constant. Think C, first letter of the word constant is C. So C is my constant. My constant is 21. So I got C equals 21. Right? Now, I'm going to take these three letters, or actually these three numbers, and I'm going to use them to solve using the quadratic formula. But one of the things that I like to do that everybody might not do, and all teachers might not show you, is I like to find what's called the discriminant first. I like to find a discriminant first because in my mind, it makes me feel like I'm doing less work because I'm breaking my work up, right, into different pieces. So the discriminant is this part of the quadratic formula. It's the part that's under the radical sign. That's the discriminant, that b squared minus 4ac part right there. That's the discriminant. Now, what does the discriminant do? The discriminant tells me before I've even completely solved the equation, before I've graphed it, if I decide that I want to graph it, it tells me how many real number solutions I'm going to have, right? If my discriminant is positive, that lets me know I'm going to have 2 real number solutions. If my discriminant is negative, that means I'm not going to have no real number solutions. I'm dealing with fake Jones, right? I'm dealing with imaginary numbers. If I have 1 real number solution, meaning I'm going to end up with 2 answers, but they're going to be the same number, right? It's going to be a duplicate. Like I might have positive 4 and positive 4. That means I have 1 real number solution, right? But I like to find the discriminant first. So I'm going to do this. B squared minus 4ac is equal to what? I just take these numbers and I plug them in. Because in algebra, what we do is we want to replace letters with numbers. Letters represent values that we don't know. Once we know the value, we don't need the letters no more. And then the math becomes simple again. So I got B right here. I know B is 10. So I got 10 to the second power. I got a minus sign right here. So I write that right there. I got a 4 right here. So I write that right there. Times A. A is 1. I'm going to use parentheses to show multiplication. And another C times C. I'm going to use parentheses again to show multiplication. So I got C, which is 21. Now, I'm just using order of operations to figure out what all of these numbers add up to or subtract up to or whatever you want to call it when I do my calculations, right? And I evaluate this, right? So first, 10 squared is not 10 times 2. It's 10 to the second power, which is 10 times 10, which is 100. A lot of people make that mistake. They look at this 2 and they say, oh, let me do 10 times 2. Nah, don't do that. That's an exponent. Then over here, I got negative 4, because that minus sign represents a negative. So I got negative 4 times 1 times 21, which is negative 4 times 21, which is minus 84. Now, all I got left is subtraction. I got to subtract. I got to do 100 minus 84, right? 100 minus 84 is going to give me 16, right? 100 minus 84 gives me 16. 16 is my discriminant. So because my discriminant is a positive number, that tells me I'm going to have 2 real number solutions. So I already know. So if I go through all my work and I don't end up with 2 real number solutions, I know I need to go back to the drawing board and check and find my mistake, right? My discriminant is 16. All right, so I'm going to use this. So now I'm going to slide over here to the actual quadratic formula. All right, and I'm going to use the quadratic formula now. So now I'm going to do x equals negative b. Now I know b is 10 in this problem. B is 10. So I'm going to do negative 10 plus or minus. And now, see, this is why I like finding the discriminant first. Because now when I use the quadratic formula, my work don't be all crowded. My formula don't be all crowded. Because I already know all of this. This b squared minus 4ac part, I already know. It's just 16. I already did all that work already, right? So now I'm going to just do the square root of 16. Because I already know what b squared minus 4ac is. I just did it right here. You see? So now I draw my fraction bar. And then on my denominator, I have 2a. That means 2 times a. So 2 times whatever a is. A in this particular equation is 1. So I do 2 times 1, right? So now I got x equal. I just start simplifying. I just start simplifying using math to try to break this down piece by piece. So I got negative 10 plus or minus. Now, the square root of 16. 16 is a perfect square. What is the square root of 16? The square root of 16 is 4. So I put 4 right here, right? Now, in case you're wondering, what is this symbol right here? This is called the plus or minus sign. It really just saves us from having to write, this whole expression out 2 times, right? Because it indicates that we're going to do negative 10 plus this other part of the numerator, and we're also going to do negative 10 minus this other part of the numerator. So instead of having to write it out 2 separate times in 2 separate ways, I could just use the plus or minus sign, all right? And I'm going to show you how to use that in 1 second. Now, in the denominator, 2 times 1, that's going to be 2. Now, here's where we get our actual answers at. I use the plus sign first, and then I divide by 2 to get one of my answers. So it looks like this. You do negative 10 plus 4, okay? Negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. Then you divide that by 2. What's negative 6 divided by 2? Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, right? Then, that's one of my answers. That's why I drew the arrow, because it's one of my answers. I usually draw an arrow and put the other answer down there. Now we're going to do negative 10 minus 4. Negative 10 minus 4. We already did negative 10 plus 4, but now we're going to do negative 10 minus 4. So negative 10 minus 4 is, of course, negative 14. And negative 14 divided by 2 is going to be negative 7. All right? So these are 2 solutions, right? Negative 3 and negative 7, right? Now, that's not an ordered pair. That's not like an x value and a y value. That just shows what the 2 solutions are, right? And we knew we was going to have 2 real number solutions because my discriminant was a positive number. So I already knew what was going to happen, right? But now I do want to also always I like to check my work because I don't like to leave nothing up to chance. And I also recommend that you always check your work because that empowers you, because then you don't got to ask nobody else if your work is right because you checked it. You know it's right. All right. So one at a time, I'm going to plug negative 3 back into the original equation and see if it gives me the true statement. Meaning, is it true? Right? Because that's what math is all about. Math is all about finding the truth. And if an answer that you have gives you the truth and the left side equals the right side and everything adds up, then you know that it's a good answer. So I go back to the original. I'm going to use negative 3. So I'm going to do negative 3 squared plus 10 times negative 3 equals negative 21. Now the question is that true? Does the left side equal the right side? Is that true? Negative 3 squared is positive 9. 10 times negative 3 is negative 30. Is 9 minus 30 equal to negative 21? All day. 9 minus 30 is equal to negative 21 all day long. So It's true. -3 is a valid solution. Now let me see if -7 also works. Go back to the original equation. -7, make sure you put them in parentheses, plus 10 times -7. Does that equal -21? Let's do our math. Use your exponent. -7 squared is positive 49. 10 times -7 is -70. So 49 minus 70. Here's my question. Is this true? Is it true that 49 minus 70 equals -21? That is true. 49 minus 70 is equal to -21. So that means that this or these are good solutions. All right? And that's basically how you use the quadratic formula. Like I said, you don't have to find a discriminant first, right? You might want to just go straight into the formula and just plug everything in and do your work. You can do that too. I'm just saying that's just my prerogative. That's like how I like to get down. But I'm using the quadratic formula and solving equations using the quadratic formula, you know? So, all right. So I hope you learned something new. If you did, please share the video, subscribe to the page if you haven't already. Tell a friend, tell a friend, and tell a friend. I want everybody to have access to this resource. I want everybody to have access to all this math. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.